There's been discourse on the internet recently, I mean, when isn't there, on the subject of hypothetical fights. Basically, people have been arguing whether 100 regular people could beat a gorilla in a fight. And frankly, the discourse has become tired and dull and filled with all sorts of horrible argumentation. But it did get me thinking about a feature, or a flaw, of a set of mechanics in D&D 5th edition's combat. Because I believe that a cadre of rank amateur common folk could handle most things that exist in this game. Today, I want to demonstrate the power of a numerical advantage in a game ruled by bounded accuracy. So what we're going to do today is select a random creature from each CR in the monster manual and have 100 rank amateur commoners try to best it in a fight to the death and see just how high up the CR ladder our 100 common folk can climb. You'll get the hang of it. CR0, we rolled a vulture. An impressive fly speed, but AC 10 and with 5 hit points. On average, our collection of 100 commoners, if they have some sort of ranged weapon like a sling, for example, they would hit this vulture on average about 55 times per round of combat. Each of those hits dealing a minimum of 1 point of damage. Yeah, this vulture isn't making it out of that. CR an 8th, a sturge. 13 AC, but still 5 hit points. Before the sturge gets within striking distance, it's taken at least 40 points of damage. CR a quarter, a Moldron duodrone. We're looking at AC 15 and HP of 11. And finally, a ranged attack on this creature. Before getting pelted with 30 successful sling attacks, the Modron duodrone is likely to have 2 successful ranged attacks of its own, which allow it to take out, on average, 2 commoners before it's pelted into dust. CR a half, the tough stat block. This stat block outranges our slinging commoners. So we finally need to set some actual ground rules for this battle, not just having everyone in a liminal space. A featureless plane where our 100 commoners stand in a curved arc, each 60 feet away from our enemy. Basically, the best strategy for the tough is to get out of their range as quickly as possible, probably by dashing, forcing the commoners to chase after them as quickly as they can to get in range to stop having disadvantage, because that is a deleterious effect on their potential success. We can assume that both sides are going to sprint away from each other forever, in which case we have to take disadvantage into account, but if the tough guy needs to actually win this mortal combat, he is going to have to take some shots at some point, slow down and allow the others to get within range as he takes those shots instead of dashing, which means he's likely only going to get 2 hits before he's taken down by 45 successful hits of sling pellets, because his AC is just 12. A minimum of 45 points of damage, but it's over 100 if you take the average. CR1, the Fairy Dragon Youth. These guys have AC 13 and 21 hit points, so they will die to any regular salvo from our group of commoners. But Fairy Dragon Youths even can make themselves invisible as a bonus action, and this invisibility stays when they attack. Disadvantage on attacks yields roughly across the spectrum of AC something like an average of 3.5, which we're going to round up to be conservative to 4. Honestly, this makes the maths really quite annoying. Thanks, Fairy Dragon Youth. Ultimately though, even assuming a functional AC of 17, that's still 20 expected hits from our commoners. A minimum of 20 damage, but if we're taking the expected damage of the d4 that a sling deals, that's about 50. CR2, a Berserker. AC 13, HP 67. No ranged attacks. Just getting into their own effective range against one of these commoners, they're taking 40 successful sling attacks, averaging about 100 points of damage. And if all of our commoners just decide to walk backwards a little bit as a crescent while slinging at him as this berserker charges them, well, it's a clean fight. CR3. A nightmare. Not a nightmare for the maths of this challenge, but the creature. It's got an AC of 13 and an HP of 68. They can go ethereal as an action, which makes them essentially immune to all of our commoners' damage. But again, it is an action to go into or out of the ethereal plane, meaning they don't get to attack, even if they can sneak up right behind you. Not going to be ideal for their survival. Yes, a nightmare can theoretically escape forever, but as soon as they show their face, it's the exact same result as the berserker, because that one extra hit point doesn't mean anything. CR4, the Flame Skull. This is our first major problem. Yes, it's got an armor class of 13 and a hit point of 40, which seems weaker than any of the previous two creatures. But it can cast Fireball, which guarantees a kill on at least 10 of our 100 commoners straight off, based on their curved line arrangement. But they can only use Fireball once a day. Our 90 remaining commoners still triumph in just a round. Except when destroyed, a Flame Skull reforms an hour later, unless it's been sprinkled with holy water or the remains have been targeted by Dispel Good and Evil. Assuming our commoners can send one of their guys to a nearby temple or something to go and get some holy water, the rest of them should be able to hold out for quite some time if they all hold their actions to fire at this creature as soon as it reforms. They can essentially make this fairly clean for a fair few hours, but eventually, through attrition, if this is a featureless plane with no other availabilities or accommodations and none of them have any holy water, well, the Flame Skull will eventually win through exhausting our commoners. Barring external help, this is a stalemate that cannot be won by the side of the living. So there's the answer. CR4, that's all you can get as a commoner. I'm not satisfied with that answer. The Flame Skull is a really, really special case. It's one of the only creatures in the monster manual that has no way of defeating it for a regular person. So, I think we can go further. Let's see how much further our commoners can get. As CR5 monster, a Wraith. Great, another complicated undead creature. That's so fun. If the Wraith survives more than one round, it can raise the spirit of one of the commoners that it's managed to kill as a spectre to join its army, to join its side, and to continue terrorizing and snowballing against our commoner army. Wraiths also resist all normal damage types, like bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing, which are the only things that commoners are really going to have access to if we just give them a weapon. And due to the setup of our 60-foot semicircular perimeter, the Wraith can also reach any commoner in just a single movement, while having the ability to attack as well. At CR13, and with a hit points of 67, the Wraith should take a salvo of about 40 successful hits on it as it does its approach to kill a commoner, which equates to roughly about 50 points of damage after we've applied resistances. Add to that the 6 extra points of damage it would take as part of crits that we're expecting as well, and the Wraith becomes the first survivor of our opening salvo. Unfortunately, summoning a Spectre is not going to be enough to give our Wraith another turn of attacks. So ultimately, the Wraith and Spectre combo score an average of about 2 kills. CR6 then. A Mage. We're getting a lot of humanoids in this random test. The CR6 Mage is strong. They get 2 fireballs a day, but they don't have access to some of the truly trivializing spells for horde encounters that exist in the game. Yet, the best bet for this mage is probably to gain distance to force the slingshots to be made with disadvantage by using fly to move as far away as it can, probably into the air, although that has massive risks because a single one of these stones hitting could break their concentration, because the mage stat block doesn't have a constitution saving throw of over 9. Or 9 or above, which is an auto success against minimal points of damage. We've covered that in other videos, but that's an important consideration. The best bet for this mage is to fly along the ground, no more than 10 feet off the ground, especially specifically so that they don't have to take full damage if they are knocked prone by losing concentration on their flight in the air. So with that said, our mage should be flying backwards and casting fireballs as many subsequent turns as they get, and then just long range damage as best they can after that. Forcing disadvantage against our slingshotters, that puts their effective AC at something like 19, meaning our mage only takes 10 hits, and it's also very unlikely that any of those are crits as well. So just 25 points of damage on turn 1. By turns 2 and 3, the mage can ensure that they are exactly 150 feet away from the nearest of these commoners, allowing them to send 2 consecutive fireballs, no longer playing defensive by flying away, but absolutely blasting these ranks, taking probably 10 casualties each hit. This allows for the total outranging of their slings and most other weapons in the game. I mean, it would be different if our commoners had longbows, of course. But even with slings, our mage just doesn't have the staying power to win this fight. Yes, they could fly away as fast as they want with their newfound fly speed and then just march until the commoners drop or they drop. But if they're forced to fight, or if they decide to fight, or if they're forced into this Mortal Kombat situation, they just can't hack it. With arcane bursts range the same as the long range of a sling, the trade eventually does go in favour of the commoners. Even though the mage hits about 3 commoners a turn after blasting 20 of them with a fireball, the regular conservative estimate for the damage of the remaining commoners is about 15 points for the next 5 turns at least, which is enough to take the mage out. The mage likely kills 35 commoners through forcing disadvantage through this retreating strategy, but ultimately succumbs to the massive amount of sling pellets coming at him, even at disadvantage. For CR7, our randomly selected monster is not randomly selected. Just for this, we are choosing our monster because it's thematic to the concept of the video. It's a giant ape. Unfortunately for our huge beast, AC 12 means 45 successful expected hits on average on round 1, which with crits averages out to about 125 points of damage, which is slightly shy of the 168 HP that our giant ape boasts. Regardless of whether the ape throws a boulder, crushing each commoner within a 5-foot sphere, or punches 2 guys into oblivion, he's not making it he's not making it past round 2. I do feel a bit bad for not using the random selection though, so I will also tell you that the thing I actually selected, the blue slard, also doesn't make it past round 2, getting a total of just 3 kills. CR8 sees our commoners fight a Kraken scion, who had 120-foot range on its long attack, putting all of our slings at disadvantage, at their very, very limit. It also has access to the 20-foot radius sphere Synaptic Static. Essentially, the Kraken Scion is a beefier version of our mage from before, with a regular AC of 16 and therefore an effective AC of 20 when factoring in disadvantage of long range. Although that is a generous estimate. Nonetheless, with our commoner's first salvo dealing only around 12.5 points of damage. We'll call it 13 just for this one, because of the 1 in 400 chance of a crit, 2 nat 20s. It's going to seem like an uphill battle for our commoners. The Scion gets just 1 Synaptic Static, which is best used off the bat to take out 10 of our commoners, same as essentially a fireball, to reduce the number of incoming attacks, essentially, which allows it to exchange 10 kills for 26 points of damage by the end of round 2. Assuming the Scion kills off 3 more commoners every single turn, the average damage is reduced to about 10 for the next 6 rounds. Assuming the Scion is able to kill off 3 more commoners with its 3 attacks every single turn. We're being generous to the monsters here. For the next 6 rounds, we're dealing with an average damage of somewhere around 10 points, bringing the total after 8 rounds to 86, reducing the average damage again to 7.5 for the next 6 rounds due to the dwindling number of commoners still alive. That brings us to 141 points of total damage, where a couple more salvos on a couple more rounds leave our commoners victorious, with about half of their members still standing. A bloodbath, to be sure, but a victory. Turns out, long-range blasting en masse is a pretty solid strategy in D&D. CR9, then. Who thought our commoners could have got this far? But this might be the end of the road. CR9's representative is the young blue dragon. I will say blue is definitely a better pick here than silver, as a cone breath weapon will tend to catch far more people than a line breath weapon in our scenario. If the blue dragon tries melee, it will die very quickly, even in spite of its AC 18 and 157 hit points. It also doesn't have a significant ranged option other than its breath weapon outside of the range of these slings either. And so to do any serious damage, it either needs to be kiting with its breath weapon and then risking the commoners getting close, or something else. The safest strategic play for the dragon on its, especially its first turn, is to use its burrow speed to escape the salvo of 100 incoming shots immediately, holding its action, if it can, to lightning breath any commoners who dare to try and peer into the hole to try and get a shot off. The commoner's best chance, in turn, is to hold their actions, hold their attacks specifically, until they see the dragon's head poke out of the burrow, at which point they get an average of 15 hits from their shots, 5 of which are crits. With a full complement of commoners, this deals about 50 damage per round. If the commoners are sensible and hold their actions for this and don't funnel themselves into a death trap or stand in a very obvious 60-foot long straight line, this is, at its worst, it's a stalemate. They have the damage potential to kill this dragon in 4 rounds, while the dragon is, again, in any sort of effective range for its own abilities as well. Even assuming some casualties, that's still true. The moment it rears its ugly head, it's on a timer, and it doesn't have much of it. I guess it may be more difficult if the commoners are still equipped with slings, because the dragon can theoretically dance on the outside of that disadvantage range. Slings only have an effective range of 20 feet. So, with that, sure, I guess. But if we say that our commoners have short bows, which are not an uncommon weapon throughout history, and if you're going up against a dragon, you kind of want something a bit beefier, that damage potential increases to 70 DPR, while outranging the dragon's breath with the bow's short range. I think it's fair at this point to say that instead of the simple, easily available sling that can be made from clothing and a piece of leather, from now on we are going to be assuming our commoners have had someone tooling them and preparing them for the battle. We're going to be assuming short bows for the foreseeable future because, well, when your proficiency bonus isn't counting into your attacks anyway, as I haven't been this entire time, they have a +2 proficiency bonus to clubs, but I haven't given them any proficiency to their slings. First, would make the maths more complicated, and second, it's not been needed so far, really. So with these short bows, they also don't need to be proficient in them to use them as effectively as we've been mathing it out so far. No matter what, whether you're proficient or not, you crit 1 in every 20 shots anyway. So without further ado, CR10, a Death Slard. AC 18, HP 178, and access to spells like Fly, Cloud Kill, Invisibility, and Blight. However, using invisibility requires an action, so that's a net neutral for the Death Slard. In fact, it's technically a losing game because they can still fire with disadvantage and still potentially hit. So its best bet is to fly away and try and catch these creatures in a cloud kill, which at a push should get about 15 commoners in total. But in exchange, the Death Slard is going to be taking 15 hits with our upgraded shortbow damage. That averages out to about 70 points of damage per round, even down 15 members. It shouldn't take our average commoners more than 4 rounds and about 20 casualties to emerge victorious. CR 11, a Horned Devil. AC 18. And 199 hit points. To be honest, the only difficulty here is that the devil outranges our commoners with shortbows. At least their short range, where they're rolling neutrally. Disadvantage is really bad in this particular case. The devil gets 3 hurl flame attacks, which are guaranteed to overkill our commoners each turn they hit in the fight. Assuming all monster attacks hit, which is what we've been doing already to get a conservative estimate, that's 3 commoners down every single round. But how many attacks hit from our commoners? Well, our old shortcut of just adding 4 to the armor class gets us 22, which means that nothing but a 20 should hit. That's not quite how it works in practice. It's not exactly 5% of the time. We'll go into it seriously on this particular case because it's important. Well, I mean, as important as any of this is. According to maths that I found on Reddit, we should expect 100 commoners to get an 18 total on a disadvantage roll 2.25 times, a 19 on their 100 rolls once, and a crit 0.25 times. 2 natural 20s. So total, that's about 3.5 hits per round, with every 14th hit being a crit. It's going to be a slog, especially as the number of commoners keeps reducing. 12-ish points of damage for our first salvo, and then we're going to conservatively drop that to 11 when our commoners lose about 10 members. At the end of 4 rounds, our devil has taken 43 points of damage and our commoner numbers have dwindled to 88, bringing the expected damage down again to 9.5. The next 4 rounds, including the first crit of the combat, gives us 41 points of damage, but 76 commoners left, reducing expected damage again to 8. We likely also see our next crit at the tail end of these next turns, so that's 35.5 points of damage, and just 64 commoners left. Next, again conservatively, until we have 50 commoners remaining, we assume our damage is half of what we began, 6 points. That is 30 points of damage over the 5 rounds that it takes to reduce the commoners' numbers to 49 in total. Our devil has, on average, 49.5, I know half's not real, but go with me, 49.5 on average hit points left out of a total of about 200. We're going to speed this up. Until we reach about 20 commoners left, we're going to assume that just 1 single hit occurs each round. Again, conservative estimate, including another 1 in 14 crit. That's 38.5 damage, 11 hit points remaining, and 19 brave commoners remaining. Unfortunately, at this point, we can expect our commoners to be hitting once every 2 rounds. Our next 6 rounds of combat are brutal. They see the Horned Devil reducing our commoners' numbers to 1, and by some cruel twist of fate, our commoners deal 10.5 damage out of the required 11. We're sticking with that just for the poetry. Even assuming that every single one of the devil's attacks hits, which it wouldn't, and even assuming that the commoners are doing slightly less damage, a slightly conservative estimate in terms of damage of what they're doing, just out of being safe on the maths here, we have a sudden death showdown versus a CR11 Horned Devil. After all these cold, hard averages, I think it's only fair that we give our 2 valiant contenders a chance to roll it out. So what we're going to do here is roll initiative for our devil and our commoner. Green for the devil, grey for the commoner. That's a 19 and a 9 with a +7. That's just 16 on the devil's initiative. So our commoner gets the first move in this particular case. So we're rolling at disadvantage due to the range requirements of the short bow. Oh, a 20, but a 14 on the disadvantage dice that matters with no bonus. That does not beat the AC of the Horned Devil at 18. And so our commoner cannot slay the beast. But if it was a longbow, because longbows have range of 150, well, our Horned Devil would be in for a nasty, nasty shock. Oh well. So if we assume short bows, this madness ends here. I'd say the short bow is probably the limit of untrained weapons we can expect the regular person in real life to figure out. The longbow is a beast of a thing. But should we do longbows just for fun? Because the rules technically don't at all limit you from using the hardest weapon possible. You just don't get your proficiency bonus. It doesn't matter if they get their proficiency bonus or not. Nothing we've done this entire video has used their proficiency bonus. The only thing that would is the club that their stat block includes, which hasn't been useful at all. I hope you're learning something here. Range, quantity, and disadvantage are the most important considerations for mass combat. So CR12, the Questing Knight. Honestly, one of the weaker things we could have rolled. This guy is essentially the Horned Devil with 3 extra hit points for our purposes. He can make this into a longbow shootout at disadvantage. But with longbows, our commoners get 1 extra point of damage every single time they hit compared to short bows. So given that the Horned Devil was close, this guy's done. The 100 commoners can beat the Questing Knight. CR13, Ultraloth. This is a challenge. Bonus action invisibility 50% of the time after its turn means that half of the time our commoners are fighting at disadvantage. It gets a once-a-day fireball, and crucially, a casting of the 60-foot long wall of fire, which, again, on average, kills our commoners even if they succeed on their save. I used a Minecraft circle generator to generate a map of our commoners' standing pattern here. Each of these squares, 5-foot squares, would have to contain 2 commoners for the rangers to work out here. So they're squeezing it. By this map, through the use of Wall of Fire, 26 people, that's 13 squares, are torched. Off the bat. Fireball would get something like 18 the next turn. Apologies for my maths earlier. I thought it was 10. I hadn't factored in that they'd have to squeeze in to get the 60-foot kind of distance that I talked about. It shouldn't affect any of the prior combats, as far as I'm aware. By this point, the Ultraloth has taken 1 volley with disadvantage, as it's a bonus action, and 1 full volley because he only gets the invisibility 50% of the time on a recharge of 4, 5, or 6. With AC 19 and disadvantage, we're looking at maybe 1 hit, dealing 4.5 damage. And the second round, we'd get a more respectable amount of 6 hits, with an average damage of 27. But that's considering that they've lost a lot of their force through a wall of fire and a fireball. But the Ultraloth's hypnotic gaze, with a 30-foot wide cone that's able to be used every turn, by the way, will probably get about 10 to 12 people in it every single round. With all of these advantages, even with longbows, our commoner's journey will end here. So what can we actually learn about 5th edition's, specifically 2024 5th edition's mechanics after all this? Well, first, ranged weapons are a cheat code against many, many, many monsters. The simple fact of doing damage, any consistent damage from 150 feet away, is so very powerful in a game where the majority of monsters do not have an attack that has that range. Secondly, we learn that area of effect beats hordes at a high enough scale. This is worth stating because there is something of a rock, paper, scissors situation in 5th edition's design. Hordes, as we've seen, generally beat solo entities. Solo entities will take down AoE blasters, and AoE blasters beat hordes. The way bounded accuracy works is that unless you're dealing with an absolutely miserable to hit score, like, say, the commoners with a +0, or an outlier of armor class, something incredibly high, the quantity of attacks is probably the most important factor for damage. According to Treant Monk's DPR calculations, an optimised 20th level fighter in D&D 24 does 83.3 damage per round. And I'm going to trust that because I'm far less competent at mathematics and specifically DPR calculations than he is. He's been doing it for years. Against, let's say, an AC of 17, our 100 commoners hit 20 times with 5 crits on average. With longbows, that's 112.5 expected damage. An army, especially a trained one, in any world operating by D&D's mechanics is so much more effective than almost any other force, including, say, a team of 4 adventurers. Case in point, I ran the numbers beyond this little experiment. Our 100 commoners, the toughest thing in the monster manual that they can take out securely is the Kraken. Not because the thing can't move on land, it can, it's just as fast as they are, but because the Kraken doesn't have any significant area of effect spells. Even its lightning strikes are single target. The Kraken is CR 23. Our commoners can even beat it with short bows. One other really key takeaway is the immense power of disadvantage when fighting against lots of weaker enemies. Imposing disadvantage on them is really excellent for your survival. It's often worth giving yourself disadvantage as well by creating obscurement like a fog cloud or a darkness on yourself just to avoid a nasty salvo, especially in combination with boosted AC. AC's above 20, you can reach a situation pretty easily where hitting you is a 1 in 400 chance, the chance of rolling 2 nat 20s in a row. There is more to be said here about how this affects the world and the mechanics of the world, and I do plan to release a video on what the natural 20 means consequentially for how skill and talent and martial prowess can even be perceived in a D&D world, but that's for another day. Fundamentally, don't underestimate quantity in D&D combat. And if you're a dragon, devil, slard, or kraken, make sure that the town that you're attacking doesn't have a competent or well-funded militia of over 100 guys, because in that case, they might not even need to call in the adventurers. Because frankly, a well-supplied, organised, and populated militia might be a stronger tool than any band of adventurers. Unless you come up against something that is immune to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, in which case you should check out my video on the scariest monsters in D&D, because they are scary for that exact purpose. I'm lucky I didn't roll a werewolf or a golem or something like that, let's just say. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you would like, check out my channel memberships. I know I've plugged it a lot recently, but I recently did a live stream and that was really fun. It is only available to members now, but make sure you catch the next one. They go live for everyone, and then the VODs are available to members after the fact. So if you want to get involved next time, keep your eyes out. I won't be doing them very regularly because it's a lot of work to set up and produce, but with all that said, I have been Tom, otherwise known as the Grungeonmaster. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.